Hello, everyone. My name is Tara All, and I'm back for another EA Zoom meeting. And I'm excited, as always, to really just have fun interacting and playing with astrology, which is, I think I'm enjoying the playing around with it a lot more these days. So I chose today's topic, Saturn and Neptune, fun with reality, hoping that we could just kick around maybe some new ideas and look at these planets in some different ways. So let's jump in. Yeah, so I added this slide because I can't emphasize enough how much, really what a delight and what a blessing EA Zoom is for me. I listen to these meetings myself, and I've been presenting for some time, and I really enjoy the community. So huge thank you to Linda and Olive and Wanda and everyone who makes these happen. There was this book I have, for those of you who can't see the screen because you're just listening in and not watching. There was this book I found somewhere, I don't even remember where it was, but there was this whole section on a Pluto gang. So there's this like illustration on these jackets of like Pluto gang members, and when I saw it the first thing I thought, oh my gosh, I would have chosen a different image, not giant fangs with blood dripping. But in some respects, we are a Pluto gang, and it's one that I am super happy to be part of. So a huge thank you to all of you. So let's jump on in. So this idea of the reality game, which it's funny, for me, it's like this combination of building up and breaking down, which is actually constantly what we're doing in life. Build up, break it down, build up, break it down. And in astrology, we know there are certain archetypes that are associated with those. And in the same vein, we're hitting a boundary so we can then go beyond it. And so for me, at least for today and recently, I want to play around with the idea of Saturn being the building up and the Neptune coming down. There's many different ways we can look at it. I mean, Uranus certainly is a liberation, and usually we think about Uranus being the reaction to Saturn, but just for some reason, I want to play with this way. So I hope that you will indulge me. And by the way, if anyone has questions or comments, anything to share, I would love for you to jump in, and I will also try to stop periodically just to make room for that. So let's start with the Saturn side. Saturn, so this idea of reality, from the Saturn perspective, it is the reality that life is an illusion. And so with Saturn, we have to show up and build things, make things, construct things, so we can actually see a tangible form. And so there's this huge piece with Saturn of finding freedom in accepting the limits. We don't think about Saturn as a freedom archetype really at all, but in essence, it's in there as well. So this idea of accepting a limit, which then gives us freedom to do whatever it is within the limit. One thing to think about with Saturn, especially with its rings, is that we have to fully explore the ring that we're in before we move on to the next ring. And oftentimes, we just want to skip, we want to go bigger and further and go out. We don't want to get into what of all that's available where we are. And to me, Saturn speaks a lot to exploration in that space. So this is why I have on here, exploring the freedom and possibility of where you're at right now. And it's funny, we don't usually associate oftentimes freedom and possibility with what's happening now. We think about how I need to break out of this to reach this place of freedom. But what about the freedom that's here in the moment, or in the choices, or in the place that you're at in your life? Saturn is reality of the known, and getting real with how you run a game that isn't working, right? This is one of the best things about Saturn. Once you figure out the game you're playing, you can change it and the rules. And Saturn also shows us sometimes how we force reality. So let's now compare that with Neptune. If Saturn was showing up, Neptune would be checking out. It's like two ways of finding the same thing. One comes in, one goes out. If Saturn is finding freedom and accepting limits, then Neptune would be finding the freedom in unlimitedness. Which, and I know that we all know this, but it's worth reminding ourselves, one doesn't exist without the other. The idea of a limit wouldn't exist at all if there wasn't an unlimitedness. It is only together that it is one whole concept, right? So if Saturn is exploring where we're at now, that current ring, then Neptune is letting go of all time and space and having the freedom to explore everything and everywhere. If Saturn is reality of the known, Neptune is reality of the unknown, but still reality. You know, for some of us, our daydreams feel a lot more real than our waking life, for example, or our fantasies feel a lot more real than what we would probably define as what's actually happening in a day. Reality is a tricky business. So with Neptune, of course, it shows how we can get stuck in the illusions that we're having and actually detach from what we call, you know, quote unquote, reality. It's almost like two extremes, you know, coming into the same middle place. So let's start with just taking a peek at Saturn. Saturn, at least for the purposes of today and for the volunteers and charts we're going to look at, I want to play with Saturn as being the part of us that is making the life we want. And this is probably not new to most of you, but everything that is happening right now is what you want. We don't like to believe that, and we oftentimes challenge it and we say, oh, I really want something different, or I'm just stuck here right now, this is where I'm really going to be. But the reality is we are choosing exactly what we want in each moment. And when we can kind of make a peace with that, it gives us some new agency, if you will, in working with what our reality is. But let's go back to the idea that Saturn is making the life you want. So Saturn represents what and how you're learning to firm up and strengthen. In some ways, this can be where you need to set boundaries, right? Oftentimes where Saturn sits in your chart, that's where you need to firm things up, define things, set boundaries, know your limits, or honor your limits, respect your limits, right? Respect is another good Saturn word. So with Saturn, we're reaching, recognizing, setting, respecting limits, as I said, and you're defining and designing for yourself. You're making life, right? Saturn is manifestation. In the earth realm, you are manifesting what you want in ways that you can tangibly touch it, see it, work with it, eat it, you know, all those earthy words. And with Saturn, it's where effort toward progress really pays off. You know, and most times I find that, well, I haven't yet to find a client that where Saturn sits, that when they really put in the work in that area, that they don't reach a greater level of satisfaction, where that effort really does pay off. You know, the working hard pays off, and working hard can be defined many different ways. So, you know, don't take that too literally. Saturn also shows what you want to see grow and become accomplished. So you want to see it grow, but then you want it to fully flourish, and in very tangible ways. You know, a simple way to look at this is you're growing a business or a garden, right? You want to see it grow up, and then you want it to become solid, secure, to expand, to be rooted, to be effective and efficient, and, you know, to serve those around you. Saturn always has an element, you know, of gifts to society. So let's quickly pop in just for so hit the thing, right? Saturn for me, I tend to read the house placement first. It's not that I don't pay attention to the sign, but it moves slower. So the more personal placement is the house. So I look at both. And in this case, I just, you know, split these out with Aries in the first and Taurus in the second. So you read that however it works for you. But what I want to look at briefly here is, depending on the sign and house that your Saturn is in, what do we want to firm up and build a strong version of for ourselves? You know, this idea of firming up, giving form, to give it shape, to give it definition, to build it, to design it for ourselves. If Saturn is in Aries or the first house, it's the self, personal will, taking action, the initiative, leadership, my self-image, how I project myself out in the world. You know, Aries in the first house is about me, to define myself. Saturn also is about authority. So in the first house would be to be, you know, my own authority in how I am confronting life. Taurus in the second house, wanting to firm up and build, strengthen, another good Saturn word, resources. You know, this is why money falls into Taurus in the second house so much, because money is a very tangible resource that we can measure, right? We can see how it's adding up in the bank account. Taurus in the second house in general has a lot to do with self-sufficiency, right? I can take care of myself. I can meet my own needs. It also is firming up a strong version of self-worth and self-value, right? To have value in myself for my inherent worthiness. And, you know, I spoke just like a second ago about Taurus in the second house, about meeting your own needs. Yeah, Taurus is in the second house, our essential needs. So Saturn, you know, wants you to build up those muscles to meet those needs. Also, comfort and pleasure, you know, sit here. Thing is, Taurus in the second house, like, we want to be comfortable in this position. But Saturn usually makes it feel pretty uncomfortable initially, but that's not the aim. When Saturn makes us feel uncomfortable or small or tight, contracted, put upon, fearful, weak, you know, all these different Saturn words that we get attached to it, it's all because it wants us to feel where there is room for us to develop something stronger and something with a true rootedness. Right? Saturn always aims to strengthen. Always. How it does it can, you know, be different ways, but it's a strengthener, and it brings stability. So in the third house, or Gemini, this is, you know, building a strong version and firming up, building up our thoughts, our mind, reason, how we put things together, how we connect ideas, how we communicate. And also flexibility. You know, we think about Saturn being rigid, but think about what it would mean to actually to firm up your flexibility or to stabilize your flexibility. Cancer in the fourth house, this has a lot to do with our feelings and psychological self. So people with Saturn in the fourth house and Cancer, which I have both, Saturn in Cancer and in the fourth house, man, we've got like a lifetime plan of really strengthening that, being our own emotional support system. To be strong and to hold, sort of rooted down into ourselves, even when, you know, life is tossing around. And especially if family didn't meet those needs, because, you know, this really gets tied in with the fourth house, is, you know, to be your own home, to be your own root, and beyond that, to feel what you were deeply rooted into, which is, you know, more personal conversation. I think Cancer in the fourth house also speaks to intuition. I'll give that to Sag in the ninth house as well, but there is definitely a psychic intuitive level of Cancer fourth house in any moon archetypes. So also this sense of belonging, and just to really strengthen the private self. You know, who I am at midnight in my bed when it's dark and I'm alone with me and I'm feeling in this whole lunar landscape, right? To really get strong and to have definition around what that is for me, who I am on the inside. Leo in the fifth house, self-expression, right? Saturn in the fifth house ultimately wants to strengthen our ability to shine, to author our own destiny, to creatively express who we are, to be our full radiant self, to not hold back, to come from the heart, to be filled with passion. And Virgo in the sixth house is tools and techniques. So I think about Saturn here being like, how do you employ the tools and techniques every day or whatever it is that you're doing, really to live the life you want to live? Tools and techniques that you can adopt and practice on a regular basis. This is also discrimination. So, you know, knowing how to make a decision and to rule out what doesn't matter and to get down to the essence is a very Virgo sixth house archetypal thing. The Virgo in the sixth house can get so filled with information that it can't absorb anything anymore. So Saturn in that sixth house or in Virgo is trying to help us strengthen up the ability to say, I can purge this, I can let go of this can be over here, and which gives me space and capacity to absorb what really nurtures me, what aligns with my essence. Which to me, this idea of purity around Virgo is really getting down to the pure essence of who we are. So health, sometimes Saturn in the sixth house manifests through needing to strengthen our physical bodies. You know, our faculties of analysis and tolerance. You know, oh boy, I've really, since I've been reading the Astrological Triptych by Dane Rujar, he talks about Virgo and its gift being tolerance. And tolerance is to be able to silently accept evolution as it's happening. So it's like a active acceptance, if you will. All right, 7th house and Libra. Wanting to firm up and build a strong version of relationships, of relating, of cooperating, of having equal, egalitarian relationships, equality in distribution of power, balance, harmony, beauty, fairness. Saturn in the 7th house also is needing to define what a relationship or partnership is for ourselves, to make up our own definition. Scorpio in the 8th house, this is really wanting to strengthen our own sense of power, to stand in our own power, to open up to intimacy, to union, to vulnerability, to the deepest truth. In some respects, it's to strengthen the parts of us that feel like our shadow, the things that we may have suppressed into, darkness, is to reconnect with them, because oftentimes those are just distorted versions. Scorpio in the 8th house archetype is transformation. So Saturn here wants to strengthen our ability literally to shed old skin and move forward, to evolve and transform and to change, and to be willing to go to the edges of our limits and to choose the unknown to move into something new. Sagittarius in the 9th house is the natural self, to really strengthen, to define, to firm up who we are in accordance with natural law. Not what's been put upon us, what we've been taught, but what we naturally are. So this links up also with our personal truth, with our confidence, our optimism, expansion, intuition. Sagittarius, we talk about it oftentimes with beliefs, which is a big part of it, but it's beyond just beliefs. We tie religion in here as well. Ultimately, it is a confidence in the nature of who we are and the bigger context and the bigger picture that we're part of. So Saturn, in this respect, wants to strengthen our ability to see a bigger picture, to explore unknown places, unknown realms, unknown aspects of ourselves, anything that gets us into foreign territory. Capricorn 10th house, limits, self-authority, our public image, how we're manifesting who we are out there in the public world. And also Saturn in the 10th house can very much be needing to firm up what we really should be responsible for, when to take responsibility, what is not our responsibility. And then contribution to society here as well, right? This is Saturn in the 10th house, Saturn in its own house, if you will. It wants like a double down, strengthening up its own archetype. Aquarius the 11th, this is individuation. Giving ourselves the freedom to be who we are, to break free, to liberate, to express unique, innovative, progressive ideas, futuristic thinking, and in doing that, to empower everyone else to do that as well. There also is a huge element here of community. Society, right? Like how we're connected across the globe. So Saturn the 11th sometimes, at a more basic level, can simply speak to our groups of friends. The groups and the networking that we're a part of. Saturn there can be, we need to really define what groups and people and causes strengthen us, and which of those groups does, when we bring our strength to them, is that the best use of, I guess, our gifts in the interest of community. The 12th house in Pisces, this vision, imagination, faith, acceptance, spirituality, compassion. It's funny because we take the house of no definition and then we put the planet of defining, which is interesting. So I think it's hard to come up with an image for this one. It is personal. I mean, everything is personal, but the 12th house to me more than anything is, it's very hard to define. And so when Saturn sits there, part of its challenge is to find a way to start defining those things that are beyond definition. Because even if the definition doesn't fully capture the essence of what the thing is, it gives people glimpses. You know, it gives people ways to see things that are beyond our human, perception. Okay, so part of the magic of Saturn is reality. We oftentimes think about reality as being the non-magic part of things, but I think the thing is, like, we're actually creating our realities, which is pretty magical when it comes down to it, at least from my view. So Saturn is the real manifestations in our lives. It is, as I put on this slide here, it's the blessing of beholding the form of our spirit, thoughts, and feelings. It's the blessing of seeing things that are ethereal or spiritual or energetic. And again, whether or not it's a perfect representation or not is not the point, but it's a way to see it. And as a human, that's an exciting way to share those things and to recognize those things, because sometimes it is in those things that we manifest that someone else uses or sees or touches or whatever it is, and that triggers that part in them. They recognize it. So Saturn, the form that our lives are taking literally is witnessing ourselves in time and space. Like our higher selves in time and space, right? So whatever you're creating, whatever you're doing, the fact that we're all sitting here, whoever's tuning in at whatever point, and those of us who are here right now, like right now, this is how our higher selves are translating into this plane. And it's pretty cool to watch your life through the moments to see how it is doing that. It shows you a lot about you. And if you can watch others in that way, it shows you a lot about them. So for me, what are you doing in the world? Like, what are you actually doing? And whatever those things are, I really give the Saturn in each of us credit for contributing those things or making them happen. It's like Saturn is this master of taking on whatever roles are necessary, using whatever resources are available to make something happen. Which is why we see, in so many charts of leaders, there's a strong Capricorn or Saturn, right? Because the manifester makes it happen. Makes it happen on the earth plane. So my last thought for Saturn is, when you build and fill your space with you, which is really what we're doing, but we can do it more consciously. And when we remember that as we're doing this, the past and future are really converging in the present. So everything we're doing right now is everything now. Does anyone have any comments or questions or anything you want to add about Saturn before we jump into Neptune? Okay, let's keep going. So Neptune. If Saturn was making life what we want it to be, making reality what we want it to be, Neptune is accepting life as it is. So Neptune in the chart can show how you're ready to break down and soften. Neptune as an archetype is a softening. We lose the edges, we lose the form. And oftentimes this is in a response to a boundary hit by Saturn. In other words, just like in the solar system, when the farthest we can see is Saturn, right? We hit a point where we can't go any further. We can't go any further in this realm or in that way. And then we have to move into other expanses. And Neptune represents those other expanses. So Neptune is to let go of reality and to lose the illusion. And this where and how melting down happens, it actually reveals the next version of truth or reality. So in contrast with Saturn, that we're actually building a reality up, here's what I want it to be. With Neptune, as we're melting down what has been in place, the next piece actually reveals itself. So it truly is with Neptune more of an allowance or allowing for life to happen. So Neptune also where you need to have faith beyond what you've been taught and beyond what you think you know. So let's think about Neptune in this context. Releasing the old to make way for more reality, or a newer version of reality. I always think of when I think of life, I think of it's always a new version, you know? I'm always a new version of me, and every moment I'm a new version of me. Life is a new version in every moment. And there's different ways we can approach that version. The Neptune way is I'm letting go of the old to see what comes up for me next. So what are we releasing to make way for more reality when it comes to Aries in the first house? In this case, instead of building up the self-image, we're letting it go, right? The form that we had built up that maybe is just very crystallized at this point in time of who we are, if we let it start to, let the mask, not like that analogy, right? But we let whatever has been built up start to fall away. We release the idea that we need to fight and defend everything, because Aries in that first house can be very attached to that subjective, reactive. I need to always be on guard. And we can release the need to use force and action to get through life. Impulsivity, subjectivity. In some ways, Neptune in the first house or with Aries is, it's letting go of some of our attachments to ourself. Taurus, the second house, can be releasing attachments to our stuff. We hold on to so many things, or the money or the job or the house or the car, or all the things that show that we have reached a point of self-sufficiency. We are flourishing in life, we are doing well, we have earned that place. But those things can't take the place of the value underneath. And so Neptune in this area oftentimes shows where we need to let go of those attachments. Also, just in general, just comfort and security, because Taurus in the second house likes to really hunker down, keep things as they are. It's like, don't rock the boat. I know how it gets from here to here this way, and I don't want to go that choppy way. So it can also mean releasing an aversion to change. Being willing to do something that feels out of control. Which, by the way, Neptune in general as an archetype is letting go of control. So anything it touches or is at is going to have an element of that in there. Gemini in the third house, releasing the idea that you know it all or need to know it all. Gemini in the third house can be very, very much attached to the idea that I need to get the information, know the information, have the information, and I need to be smart. And even just the idea that things will make sense, right? The Gemini mind, it wants to connect the dots, so I should be able to make sense of everything. Well, we know what happens when Neptune touches things. It doesn't make sense. Not in the way that we've been making it make sense. It makes perfect sense from a different perspective. So even attachment to the facts, that the facts add up to something, or that because you got the story, now you know the truth. Empirical data, all these pieces with Gemini in the third house. Cancer in the fourth house can be releasing emotional attachments. Attachment to family, to home. The environment, the environment that makes us feel most safe and comfortable, right? With Cancer, it's like, if I just go back to my home, things will be fine. That space that I control, that I make safe, that I make comfortable for me, where I know things are taken care of. Neediness is another one with Cancer in the fourth house. Releasing the idea that somehow all of our needs should be met by someone else or something else. And just simply hypersensitivity. Leo in the fifth house can be certainly releasing our pride, to need to be the most special one, to be recognized, to be approved, to be adored. Can certainly be just letting go of the ego. And sometimes with Leo, it's that childish behavior for attention, because Leo wants attention so much that we can joke sometimes with Leo that it would rather have bad attention than no attention because it just wants to be seen. So when Neptune gets in the game, we know Neptune brings on a fog. Neptune is hard to see clearly. Neptune brings on distortion. So all these ways that Leo or planets in the 5th house like to present themselves on that stage, whatever that stage looks like, Neptune is trying to break that down, break it down so a more real version of the self can come forward. Virgo in the 6th house, releasing that there's the idea that we're going to get it right if we work hard enough at it. That there is such a thing as perfection. Letting go of the hyper-focus, the microscopic view, the details, the working so hard for it. And see, the idea sometimes with Virgo in the 6th house is that if I just keep going at it, keep going at it, I'll get there. And generally, that's not going to be the path. And also with 6th house and Virgo can simply be releasing guilt. And that there's always a problem, right? Because Virgo in the 6th house can have this pathology of like, no matter how good things are, they always see that one little thing that's just not quite right. So letting go of that piece. 7th house in Libra, releasing relationship patterns. It's not necessarily relationships. So oftentimes with Libra, we talk about like the relationship. Of course, it's going to involve relationships, but it's really about how we relate and our relationship patterns. The 7th house in Libra can also be releasing ideals. The idealistic relationship, the idealistic situation, the ideal person, the ideal partnership. There can be an element of superficiality attached to it because we want it to look, we want the mirror to look the way we want it to look. So when Neptune comes in here, there can just be lots of moments of delusion and disillusion as relationships and how we engage in them reveal to not be what we thought they were. And that's exactly what Neptune is meant to do there, right? To break it down so we can see what's really available and we can make new choices. The other piece here with the 7th house and Neptune is overcompromising. To let go of patterns of basically sacrificing oneself to bring things into balance, which is not true balance. Scorpio, letting go of control, the drama, the intensity, the overwhelm, the investigation, the power games, the entanglements. This 8th house in Scorpio, it's life or death. There's very little room for just ease. So Neptune here can be absolutely letting go of what I call oftentimes the trauma and the drama of life. Sagittarius, the 9th house, almost always involves some level of letting go of our beliefs, of what we thought the truth was, oftentimes what we were taught the truth was. But it builds up not just over, one lifetime. So that exact seed is hard to find, and it doesn't really matter. It's just the idea that what we thought was true for us, there's room for something else to emerge. It can also be releasing our sense of righteousness. Whatever we did adopt as our truth can become very dogmatic when it comes to Sagittarius in the 9th house. I know my truth and this is what it is, and there's not room for something else. And the need to convert and convince certainly lives here, and also inflated confidence, which oftentimes is a compensation, which is a very Jupiter ruling Sagittarius. It's a very, the idea of compensating and overcompensating for things falls into this area. Capricorn 10th house, releasing the old rules, the old regulations, the old traditions, the responsibilities, the idea that you have to be in charge of everything, or even that your public role is this way. I've always been a teacher, so therefore I should continue being a teacher. These ideas, the conditioning in general, and with Capricorn, the 10th house, there's oftentimes so much room to release shame and judgment. This can be such a freeing combination. after the fear of like life dissolving goes away, because the 10th house, you know, it has attachments to how things are. So it doesn't necessarily initially respond comfortably to being disintegrated. So Aquarius in the 11th house, it can be releasing the idea that we always need to rebel against something. Sometimes it's simply releasing isolation. You know, sometimes that Aquarius 11th house archetype can isolate itself or detach itself. And we know in evolutionary astrology that we use Uranus, Aquarius 11th house oftentimes as trauma archetype. So I added this in here for those of you who subscribe to that way of thinking. Can also just be releasing extreme individualism. You know, we get so far out there that there's a need to sort of relax and soften that need to break free and to kind of let it be. Sometimes releasing our idea of community or who we've linked ourselves up with, and sometimes it's literally letting go of our vision for the future. You know, we've got set in a certain way of this is where I'm going, this is where the future is going, these are my, you know, hopes and wishes and goals, I'm going this way, and when Neptune comes in, it can say, hey, wait a second, there's actually something better, something more real for you. And finally, when Neptune is in its own house or in its own sign, Pisces, there can be a real release of suffering and release from illusions, delusions, fantasies, idealism, escapism. You know, this Pisces in the 12th house can be very secluded, kind of cloistered away. So it can be a release from being released from having to leave life. You know, it's almost like with Pisces in the 12th house, there's a feeling that, you know, I have to kind of get out of this body, I have to transcend out of this body, I need to move somewhere else to be okay. And I think when Neptune comes in there, it kind of softens it down to say, you know, you don't have to leave, you know, you can stay. And it's safe to stay. And this can also be releasing the need to save, because as we know, Pisces in the 12th house and Neptune, you know, loves to be a savior. And then sometimes just a confusion, because these archetypes as well there can be an element of confusion, of so much information, so much energy that it's hard to find any single definition in it. Okay. So here's some thoughts I have for Neptune. When we talked about Saturn, we talked about working hard, and that working hard oftentimes yields really awesome results. And you can play with these words working because they mean different things. I'm using the words working in the way that we tend to use them, which is work hard, put in the effort, set a goal, you know, do that thing. With Neptune, I think the best advice is to stop working with Neptune. Neptune is not, for me, a working archetype. It's about coming back into natural flow. It's about slowing down, fuzzing out, relaxing, allowing, breathing enough that homeostasis actually comes back. So it's like doing less and being more. Which is why many times, you know, different ways of meditation come into this, right? Because it gives us opportunity to just be, to contact those parts of ourselves, the capital S self, which doesn't come necessarily from doing more. Although it's not that it doesn't. You know, all these things can happen in any way, any place, any construct. So any of these things I'm sharing is not to limit one, it's just offering some ideas around how I feel like the natural flow of the archetype is. So with Neptune, the next layer of truth is going to be revealed like the washing of the tide. And that just comes in when it comes in and goes out when it goes out. So with Saturn, we have this idea of coming together, but with Neptune, it's being willing to come undone, to unravel. And it is impossible for your spirit to disappear. I say this because some of us, whether we consciously, you know, recognize it or not, where Neptune sits in these same archetypes, we can have, there can be a fear of literally being lost, of disintegrating. And that's impossible to happen. Where Neptune is shows there's so much more for you to discover. And that discovery comes in letting go, right? Unless we make more room, we won't get something more. And so Neptune to me very much is an archetype of making room. So what is reality? Well, my belief is that we're just making it up as we go. So, you can define it as you want. Some of us, believe that this whole life experience is a real thing actually happening and that nothing will happen afterwards. Some of us believe that it's kind of all part of a big, movie show, and maybe we're even in some room somewhere else kind of watching ourselves do something. Maybe it's like the Matrix. We don't know exactly what it is. And to me, that part doesn't matter because I'm having my experience. And the actual facts about that experience matter to me less than the truth of where I'm at with me. So the space between Saturn and Neptune is you. It's you living it. You're between the boundary and the boundless, which is really pretty empowering if you feel into that. And whether you take control, which is the Saturn function, or lose control, which is a Neptune function, it is all the same thing. Because it's all part of the realization of what is. So, is one way more like you? In other words, which path gets you to the truth or to the reality? It's a combination of both, I believe, but we tend to be more, oftentimes we're drawn more to one than the other. If it's Saturn, then the idea of making things a thing, the idea that we are a thing, definitions, mastery, what holds you up and in, the land, the earth, then those are ways of discovering your reality. If it's Neptune, then it's the idea that there is no form. I'm not a thing. There is actually no thing. And the mystery and what takes you out and away, the ocean of the spirit, becomes the path to discovering more reality. But it's all going the same place, is my point here. So, now ready for volunteers, and these are the questions, and I always go a little over, so I am, one point in time, maybe I'll learn to talk less, we'll see. So the questions I have of this is, when we pull up each of the charts, I would like us to look at Saturn and Neptune, and these are the ideas. So if you three volunteers can kind of hold these in your mind here, because we'll have to jump to the charts. Does the idea of firming things up and building your reality, does it actually play out for you when you look at your Saturn signature or when you think about your Saturn signatures in the chart? What I'm really going for here is are these things we're talking about, do they really happen for you? And then with Neptune, are you experiencing more of a melting down, like a letting go of your constructed reality when you look at where Neptune is at and what it touches in your chart? And then just finally, I would like to know whether your reality, whether you relate more with it coming together or coming apart. And we can always jump back to the slide if we need to. And Francisco, we're going to start with you. And for those of you listening, while you get unmuted, for any listeners, for any point in time, Francisco has Saturn in Gemini in the 10th house. And it is actually opposing Neptune in Sagittarius in the 4th house, which is conjunct Jupiter in Scorpio. Francisco, can you unmute yourself? Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I was muted. So what was the question?
So the first question I'd like to know, when it comes to Saturn, so you have Saturn in Gemini in the 10th house.
Right.
And so, and and there's aspects as well, but we don't have a lot of time. So I feel like, you just share what you want. But what I would love to know is what your Saturn, like, what is your experience of it? Do you feel like, so let's take Saturn in the 10th house. Do you feel yourself building up and defining yourself in those areas?
Yes, very much, very much. Actually, in this solar return, I have Saturn in my first house, so I've been doing a lot of work in mastering myself and setting boundaries.
Yeah. And so if we were just, so let's just jump to your Neptune. What's going on for you in your 4th house? And this is because I'm curious to see if where your Neptune is, and also because it's sitting right there with Jupiter, like when it comes to family, when it comes to, the beliefs that you've learned maybe in your family or how you were grown up, for example, do you feel like that? Do you feel like that's something that you are letting go of, or do you feel like that is more something you're building for yourself?
It's letting go, 100%. I was raised as a conservative Catholic, so everything was a sin, and like astrology was devil stuff in my family. So over the past few years, I've been letting go of that. I never go to church anymore. I don't consider myself a Catholic. I'm doing devil stuff by meeting with you right now. I went to a Taoist retreat in Thailand in complete darkness. So it's.
And so I guess so with Saturn in Gemini, what is your relationship with, I guess, learning, communicating? Is that part of what you're doing? Like, do you find yourself using that at all in your work or in your daily life?
In a weird way, as you can see, Saturn is square my Mercury retrograde, and maybe you've noticed that I stammer a bit. So this aspect made me learn to be a better listener rather than a good speaker.
But that's a beautiful example of how Saturn strengthens and how we build something up, right? Saturn shows a perceived weakness. Like we could say stuttering, right, is a difficulty, but instead that becomes a strength. And so for me, that's such a beautiful illustration of Saturn building up, right? Saturn built up your listening skills, or you working with your Saturn built up your listening skills.
Absolutely. And I've been working in sales for the last years, maybe 10, 15 years. So instead of being like a carnival barker and push products into a customer, I learned how to listen to what the customer wants. And, okay, so I can offer you this, which is a win-win solution or a win-win offer.
Yeah. So what would you say overall? Would you say so for you, reality, in your life, you discovering your reality, or if you prefer the word, your truth, do you feel like it's been coming together or coming apart? Like if you looked at it as an image, like the image of your truth or the image of reality, has it been coming together for you, or have you been finding it as it's kind of fallen apart?
Well, I would say a few years ago, it came apart completely. Right now, it's coming together.
So it came apart and now it's coming together.
Right.
And I think it's interesting because you have Saturn, Neptune in opposition. So of course they're playing together. It's to me, it's almost a perfect, like the mirror. If you look across the way, it's almost as if, and to me, Neptune is the bigger hitter because it's it's a slower moving planet. So it would make sense to me that it would first fall apart and then have room for Saturn, to step in and come together.
Of course, I have to let go, Neptune, of belief systems or limited beliefs, destructive in your dialogue some destructive habits or thought patterns, and then my reality began to come together.
Yeah. Awesome. Is there anything else, Francisco, that you would want to share with us that you feel like would be helpful in understanding either Saturn or Neptune or them together in this way?
Well, there's a couple of things. The first one, maybe it's not connected, but I've always had a very strong feeling of what is right, despite what the law says. Mm-hmm. I, in a way, I understand that even though what the law says is right, it may not be that right.
Yeah.
Or what they say is wrong, it may not be that wrong. And the other one is like, I had a Neptunian father, as you can see, Neptune in the fourth. Mm-hmm. And then this Saturn like stopped me from inheriting his Neptunian habits.
Interesting. So you actually use that as your own boundary to say, I don't want that to blend into me.
Right.
Yeah. That's awesome. And, you know, I think about as far as that your idea of the laws, right, and not necessarily having to be like the letter of the law, that to me is very much speaks to a Neptune softening Saturn, right? Because Saturn the 10th can be very attached to the letter of the law. This is how we always do it. But a Neptune touching that, and especially a Neptune conjunct Jupiter and a Neptune in Sagittarius, is going to be wanting to find the natural law, which is what I'm hearing you describe. You know, it's not the man-made law. It is the law that we know to be true at a level that all of us knows beyond any sort of conditioning.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's awesome. Anything else?
I think that's all for now. And I know we're short of time, so maybe we should allow you to move on.
Okay. Thank you, Francisco.
Thank you, Tara.
Wanda, are you ready?
Hi.
Oh my gosh. So let's say for the recording so people can know where things are at for you. You've got, wow, pretty much you've got a Saturn party. You've got Saturn conjunct Mercury and Chiron, all in Pisces in the 7th house. And those are in opposition to Pluto and Uranus, if anyone wants to know that. And then we've got Neptune that is in Scorpio in the 3rd house. And that Neptune is conjunct the South Node. So, Wanda, what can you first, so kind of back to for you with Saturn and all that stuff going on with Saturn in the 7th house, what has your experience been of kind of defining that area for yourself, or even sometimes, like I use the word sometimes like growing up with Saturn, you know, how we've had to sort of take responsibility for ourselves, how we've had to sort of build the thing for ourselves, define it for ourselves. Do you feel that with your Saturn?
Yes, so probably since day 0.
Oh, can you, and so I guess what could you share with everyone maybe the main thing that stands out in your mind that might help people to get a feel for what that actually looks like for you? Saturn in the 7th house, relationships.
I've always questioned basically everything. How relationship, I've known from a very early age, been able to see through the illusion of relationships, the institution of marriage and all of that kind of stuff. So it's basically seeing through the illusion of the so-called right way to be the way you're supposed to be, and gotten in trouble for questioning it.
Interesting. But do you feel pretty confident now, as far as like if someone were to say to you, hey, you know, what does it mean for you to be in a healthy relationship? My guess is you could probably give a really good answer. Yes,
age has made it where I'm more comfortable in my skin. So how my life and relationships are structured is because they work for me. And whoever doesn't like it can, we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. Yeah. At the same time, though, when you do choose, someone else who can really show up, someone who can really, really be a partner with you, there's a huge amount of, strength in that. To me, when with Saturn in that house with touching all those planets, gives this huge ability to build something with someone, for teamwork, to actually to have things come together. And I think it's another powerful image of Saturn in that 7th house.
Yes, it's actually putting to the image that comes to mind, making it 3D, pulling it out of the mind and actually making it 3D.
Yeah, that's a perfect illustration of Saturn in the air sign, air house 7, like that's just, it's like, it's not just an idea, right? It happens. And I like that. Okay, so let's look at Neptune. So as far as for you, and this is interesting because you got Neptune conjunct that South Node in Scorpio in the 3rd house. Have you experienced any melting down, unraveling, having to kind of let things come undone with that particular signature?
Yes, definitely the melting down of like I said, the prescribed way of thinking, and being more comfortable with it, because I know I see things in a very different way than other people do, and not being afraid to say, hey, this is the way I see it.
Yeah. And you've got a trine between Saturn and Neptune. So can you share anything about that? Because my guess is that your version of reality, how you make your reality, how you perceive reality, how you create reality, whatever words you'd like to use around that, or truth, with Neptune working with Saturn, there's like this happy flow between, building up and coming down. And so is there anything you can share with us as far as how you work with that or your insights around it?
Just basically, the structure, I'll get a general idea, but I don't let it be rigid, like, okay, this is the idea and this is exactly how it's got to turn out. When I let it just flow, things kind of come in, things show up. Oh, this is, what I need to accomplish this. And then once I do that, then something else flows and comes in. So that's about the best way I can describe it.
Yeah. No, well, flow is a perfect word for a trine, right? That's the idea. But the thing about trines is, like, it sounds like you work with it, and so many of us, we have trines, we get lazy, right? A trine just flows, so it's easy to not do something with it. And I feel like when Saturn's involved in a trine, there's a little bit more of a push to do something with it, meaning, Saturn is not going to be so happy just sitting still.
No, I definitely do something with it. You could probably ask my husband, and he'll tell you. It's like, what are you into now?
But this idea, right, of the idea of reality, right? What is real? What is not real? Does it really matter at all? Like, there's no, more fun play than the interplay between Saturn and Neptune. It's real. No, it's not. You know what I mean? Like, it's this, and if you could embrace that, a moment to moment, that gives you so much space in life to just kind of show up however you show up, at least to me. And then even to say, well, I can manifest it or make it happen, bring it into the 3D, like you say, but without attachment to the 3D, and that to me is such a blessing when you're, just living, really, but to people around you, I think, as well. I like the idea.
Yes, definitely.
So would you say, Wanda, overall, do you feel like you're more coming together or more coming undone when it comes to reaching your version of reality?
The prescribed role is coming undone, and that's melting down, and more of the real self is coming forward.
Yeah. So for you, the melting down was first?
Yes, melting down that, that wasn't a part of me.
Yeah.
Or that way you should be.
Yeah. Exactly. Is there anything else that you want to share with us about this that you think would help people or give people more insight into their own coming together and coming undone?
Kind of going with the flow and question everything.
Yeah. Yeah, like for me, part of it is like, and it doesn't, and not to take it too seriously. You know, that's another thing I would say too, is like it's, you know, what seems real today might not seem that way, you know, even tomorrow.
Tara, we've only got like a few minutes left.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want us to jump? Do you want us to jump to Shelley at all? Because I'm guessing we probably need to stop now.
Yeah, definitely. Please go to Shelley. Yes.
Okay. Shelley, are you ready to go?
Yes.
Okay. Nothing like making it quick. Okay, so you have Saturn in Aries in the 11th house, and you have Neptune in Scorpio in the 6th house. How would you describe for us, when it comes to that Saturn in the 11th house, things coming together or defining things for yourself? And I'm thinking 11th house specifically has a lot to do you know, with communities and with group and kind of where you find your sense of belonging while retaining your uniqueness. So do you feel like that there's been a coming together around that with Saturn?
Yeah, it's been something that I've needed to work on because I feel like I'm more inclined to be in my own shell and be more of an introvert, and that I don't get strengthened from group activities, but I need to expand that, because I think the 11th house with groups and society and all that what I have read in another aspect of my chart from someone else was that, what did I say? It was that I have more insecurity about group participation and acceptance in groups, and that I shouldn't be so worried about it, that I should just be confident and be part of groups to have a greater impact in society, and that I don't need to have the anxiety about group acceptance. So that's where I need to grow. That's where, and I have been over a long time.
Yeah, yeah. And do you feel, so with Neptune's in your 6th house, and it's in Scorpio, how would you, or what would you share in your life as far as things coming undone or unraveling, or those, you know, the melting away of the old? How have you experienced that?
Well, it seems like with the perfectionistic, you know, kind of feeling responsible to help others, that is also, Neptune opposes my ascendant, and I read that can tend to make me even more apt to sacrifice myself for other people. And it's been kind of the thing I've been working on in therapy big time, is codependency and coming out of that, and feeling more of a debt to myself, that I owe myself more than I owe other people, that I will drain myself if I don't rejuvenate that first before I start to give to others.
Yeah. Sometimes I think that
the oxygen mask on myself and put it on my baby.
Yeah. And the 6th house also sometimes holds so much guilt, so it can be really like the kind of the melting down the idea that, you know, it's not your fault. You know, like life is happening as it's meant to happen, because that 6th house is such a control freak house. You know, it wants to control the environment, control the body, and to control things, and to think it can fix things into perfection. And, you know, there's just no such a thing. So
I have had to big time let that go, and only control myself. I can't control other people.
Yeah. So what would you say overall? Do you feel like with your version of discovering reality or truth, do you feel like overall your life, has it been more of a things coming together or things coming undone?
It came undone for quite a while, and it is coming together now.
Nice. Nice.
But it's weird how it works out, like these particular things with being in the 11th house and the 6th house, and the aspects I have with Neptune are like, it was kind of freaking me out. because it was really a lot of what I have been working on in therapy, and I wasn't really thinking about it in this context. But sometimes I wonder about just how much this plays into our personality to such a degree that we actually blame it on other things when it's actually our planets.
Well, and I would take a step back and I would say it's just us. You know, I mean, honestly, like to identify with any one thing in your chart isn't the truth of who you are. You know, what we do in these groups is we take little bits and pieces and we try to understand them, but those little bits and pieces can't ever explain like the wholeness of who we are. So I think, and that's a very Neptunian thing in some ways, if you will. Like it gives me though, like this breathing room and this freedom that, you know, it's okay. You know, it's really okay. And so for all of us, wherever Neptune is, and especially those of us who have more Neptune aspects and prominent Neptune, to let it wash away. You know, it really is okay. And there really isn't, like, the definition itself is actually an illusion, you know? So.
Yes.
Well, I know, Lynn, we have to wrap this up, but Shelley, if there's anything you want to share wisdom with the listeners around these two things, I know you have had a life full of interesting things. So if you have anything briefly that you think would be an offering, please share with us.
I have needed to let a lot of things go. And so I think that understanding these placements and what vulnerabilities might be with them has helped me a lot in recognizing precisely what I need to let go of and how it might be preventing me from growing. And so in that aspect, it really, really helps me to focus on what it is that causes me anxiety and to hold on, and what causes me fear, and how to learn to let that go.
Yeah. It does for me too, Shelley. Even just simply reminding myself that where my Saturn is, you know, set boundaries, firm up. And I remind myself where Neptune is, you know, relax, let go. Even that in a stressful day is like, it's like a golden ticket sometimes. And, you know, we don't have to be rocket scientists to appreciate those pieces. So.
Okay, Tara, thank you so much. What a fantastic meeting. I was absolutely enthralled. And great volunteer feedback.
Thank you, volunteers.
They were wonderful. All right, would you all please thank Tara, everybody?
Thank you, Tara.
Thank you, Tara.
Thanks, Tara.
Thank you, guys, and thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Tara.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.